books, projects, and of course, what inspires them to write. Today, joining me is Michelle Jones Coles, Esquire. She is a civil rights attorney with the Department of Justice. But today, our conversation is about her debut, award-winning young adult novel, Black Was the Ink. Black Was the Ink also was a recipient of the New Visions Award honors. A little bit about the book. The book is about a young 16-year-old boy by the name of Malcolm, who takes a fantastical journey through Reconstruction-era America with the help of a ghostly ancestor. While working on present day, trying to save their family farm in Mississippi, because the state was trying to claim it. This all started from an incident that he encountered in DC in a local park with the police that got him so upset, frustrated, angry, despondent, that he didn't want to do anything because he felt that there was nothing available for young teens to grow, to be happy. Nothing happens good to them. But his mother had something else in mind for him. She decided to ship him off to Mississippi to spend time with his family. That brings us to the rest of the story. Joining me today on Meet the Author is the author herself, Michelle Coles. Welcome to Meet the Author.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. A little bit about the book. We have, the book is currently available on blackbookstore.com. This is the book. Black is the New Ink.
Black
you can pre-order it.
Black was the ink.
Black was it. I don't know why. Black was the ink. Yes. Black was the ink. It's currently available on blackbookstore.com. You can pre-order the book. It'll be available
November 2nd.
October the 2nd.
November 2nd. It's going to be November 2nd.
So November the 2nd, this book will be available. But I would suggest that you go ahead and pre-order, purchase it now, so that once it's available, we will ship it right out to you. First question I have for you, what inspired you to write Black Was the Ink?
That's a good question. So I'm going to have to take you back to the summer of 2015. Okay. And at that time, I was on maternity leave with my second son. I have 4 boys now, and it was my second son I was on maternity leave with when the Mother Emanuel massacre happened. Wow, and yes. I think we probably all remember where we were when we heard that news that there had been a shooting at the church in Charleston, and how that just ripped through so many people's hearts and caused so much pain, and especially to the people that were killed. 9 people were killed at the church that day. And so I started looking into the church, and one of the things that I saw was just how rich its history was. And I wasn't aware of the length of its history and what an important role the church has played throughout American history. And so just a little tidbit it was founded in the early 1800s, around 1822, I think it was. It might have been 1819, but it was founded by Denmark Vesey, whose name may be familiar as the leader of one of the largest slave revolts or attempted slave revolts in American history. Like all other slave revolts in the United States of America, it was unsuccessful. They were found out. Everybody that was involved in planning it were hung and killed. But that was the beginning of the church. And then after that slave revolt, the city of Charleston passed an ordinance that made it illegal for Black people to gather to practice their faith and their religion. But the congregants in the church continued to meet in secret, underground, and continue to practice their faith. And that takes us through the end of the Civil War. After the Civil War ended and slavery was abolished, the church started working on building a brick and mortar building. And so they got their first building, right after the Civil War. And the pastor that led their church at that time was a man named Richard Kane. And Richard Kane happened to be one of the first Black members of Congress. And so I'm seeing these points like this is really, there's something here, something really interesting here. And then more about the church, I saw that Booker T. Washington went and spoke there, and Coretta Scott King. So now we're just kind of fast forwarding through time. Coretta Scott King led a protest from the steps of the church and ended up getting met by bayonets from the South Carolina National Guard, all the way up to 2015, when a young teenager, a teenager is what's so tragic about it, is that someone so young could be filled with so much hate, stepped into that church and killed all those people. And so for me, it was, how have we not come further in all of this time?
Yes.
Why are we still here? Why are we still having these conversations, crying these same tears? Why aren't we further along? And that's really where the story came together for me, because as I remember I was on maternity leave and I'm holding my infant son in my arms, and it's like, how can I explain this world to him? Because he's born in 2015. He doesn't know anything about the last 150 years. He's innocent.
That's right.
He's new. He's coming into this thing filled with love from his parents and everyone we surround him with, but he's going to encounter this type of hate inevitably outside of our home. And so I wanted to write something to prepare my children and to help them contextualize the white supremacy and hatred that continues to exist, so that they know how to move and navigate in this world. But at the same time, I really wanted to give an alternate narrative, alternate story to other, all Americans, because a lot of them, they don't have the context to really understand this moment and where we are in history and what has led up to it. And so I wanted to write something that would help them put all the pieces together as well. And if they are being fed, lies and different things wherever they are, they would have at least the opportunity to see another, side of American history and other truths, and they could choose a different path as well.
Yes, rightly so. I agree with you. Well said. I like everything that you said. Just a little historical tidbit for you on the AME Church. You know that Mother Emanuel was the first AME church, Black church in the South. So which made it, the AME as a denomination started in 1816 in Philadelphia, and then they're making it one of the second churches began down in the South. So yeah, that was you covered a lot of historical facts right there, just off of the steps of that one church, and from doing your research, right? So the entire book, I've started reading the book. I have not finished it yet, but what I've picked up so far, I read a lot of snippets about history, and you just alluded to that. I see history. I see historical facts that are possibly good things to talk about. Was that intentional to add that to the book?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way I envisioned it is just an incredible resource to learn about a time period in history that I think is largely ignored, despite being so consequential. And so there's just, and also on top of being so consequential, that you see so many parallels to what we are experiencing and going through today. Yeah. Yeah. And so I wanted to tease out as many of those parallels as I could see, but I also wanted to lift up, there were so many incredible people coming right out of slavery that were just doing things that would blow your mind, and I think so much of when we look back at history, we don't see those stories a lot of times. No, we don't. We really don't. We get the slave story, and that's a very important story to tell, and is not discussed enough already. But that's kind of where I feel like our history ends. It goes from slavery to the civil rights movement, and there's this 100-year period where it was like, were Black people here? What were they doing?
Slavery was almost, history tries to almost glamorize slavery. They kind of give you, here it is. They had the plantation. It was economics. They had cotton, tobacco, whatever. But you didn't tell those stories. Right. that
Right.
what really happened, the how separated families,
Right. Right.
how women were raped because you felt that they were your property and you can take
Property.
advantage of it. This is my property. I can do whatever I
Right.
want.
Right. How you could get insurance on your slaves, and when
Exactly.
they
You can
died, you
insure
getting paid.
you're right. It was a form of, you could insure your property. So
Sure,
just
your
like
property.
if, damaged goods, I can be
Right.
recouped for my damaged goods.
Right. Right. But what I find was really interesting is, even though we don't talk enough about slavery and what it was like, we really don't talk enough about what it was like taking those first steps into freedom. And what was that
Yes.
transition? What
Yes.
was that transition like where, all of a sudden, you have voting rights. You can run for office. You can save your money in a bank. You can buy property. There was a brief period of time in our history, which was the 1870s, where Black people were doing all these
All
things.
those things.
All those things.
That's
before Jim
correct.
Crow clamped down on it. There were 15. I'm just going to say there were 15 Black members of Congress.
Exactly.
In the Reconstruction era.
And they were most of them were from the South.
Most of them were from the South. All of them were from the South. And half of them had been slaves.
Yes.
The other half had been born free, but half of them had been slaves. Like, how mind-boggling is that? That not 4 years, 5 years, 6 years prior, you were considered someone's property. And now you were walking into the halls of Congress as a member of equal rank as any other white lawmaker. I find that fascinating.
Right.
There were Black judges in the 1870s. People don't think about that. There was Black governor. There was acting governor of Louisiana, PBS Pinchback, in the 1870s. And he ended up being one of the founders of Southern University. And so there's this rich history that's intentionally ignored. I don't want to just say neglected, because it was intentionally distorted. First, because if anyone has seen the horrible movie Birth of a Nation, they have, not the one about Nat Turner, but the one.
I was going to say the original version.
The original. That one. Yeah. But the original one, if you've never seen that, you should see it, because it was a propaganda piece on how they wanted to characterize the Reconstruction era and how it was an abject failure, and how Black people had basically no business being free from slavery, was the message of that story. And it's just so contrary to the facts. Yeah. and how well Black people actually were doing with their freedom, and all the amazing things they were doing with their freedom.
Exactly. One thing that you did that I liked about the book, everything you just talked about the statesman in the book, you actually put together, I'll say, like an appendix.
Yeah.
In the book to kind of outline and highlight some of the people that you talked about. So as a form of a history lesson built right inside the novel.
Yeah.
Was that intentional?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, we have all these discussions about what Confederate statutes need to come down. We need to have some conversations about what statutes need to go up. because there are some people in history that were just doing phenomenal things, and nobody knows their name. And I'll give you an example. I mean, there's so many examples in the book, and it's definitely Black people, but it's also white people. It's also the white people like Charles Sumner, who was a senator from Massachusetts, who was ride or die for equal rights for Black people. And, in the 1870s, he authored a bill that did pass. It passed in 1875, the Civil Rights Act of 1875, that made segregation illegal in most places open to the public. That's now, right. If you tell people that, it's like,
they don't believe it.
you can't believe it, because our experience, Jim Crow, segregation didn't end until the 60s, right? Or at least de jure. By law, segregation didn't end until the 60s. De facto, we're still fighting today, but we're going to talk about the legal segregation.
Right, the legal, yes, I know what you're saying.
Didn't end until, the 50s and 60s, but that bill was passed in 1875, right? And so so then you have to ask, well, then what happened? The Supreme Court happened. The Supreme Court declared that law unconstitutional in 1883. And so there, it's like, it's these patterns that repeat over and over again, just like with the Voting Rights Act of 1965, how the Supreme Court in Shelby v. Holder was able to narrow the scope of that bill. And now we're able to see all of these states pass, all of these different laws that are disenfranchising Black people. So these are repeating patterns. But
Yes.
if we don't understand the history, then we can't contextualize it and we can't be prepared to resist it.
Exactly. I see this as a great book for middle schoolers to read. Do you foresee using have an opportunity to position this book in the hands of teachers or school districts as a part of their curriculum?
Yes, so my publisher is Lee and Low Books, and they're the largest multicultural children's book publishing children's book company in the country. And they have great relationships with schools and with libraries. And they have also developed a teacher's guide, which is phenomenal. And if it's not on my website yet, I'll make sure it's on my website. My website is www.michellepols.com. And I've also shared it on my social media handles. So you can find those on my website as well. But it's a phenomenal teacher's guide. And I encourage you to take a look at it. But I think it'll be a great resource for middle school kids and high school kids. And the adults that have read it have also said they've gotten so much from it and learned so much and enjoyed reading it. So I feel like it's just a great resource for anyone.
I totally agree. I've been reading it, and it is a good read. You can see it. It's realistic. It has a lot of elements. That it could be a scenario of a book. Everything about it. Speaking of that, are any of your characters based on any of anyone in particular, or are they all just created?
Well, so everyone in the past, so the book has, two parts. It's got the present part, which, as you mentioned, it's Malcolm, teenage boy in the present, staying with his family on their farm in Mississippi. And then through the help of his ghostly ancestor, Cedric, he ends up time traveling in a way to the past. So almost everyone Malcolm meets when he's in the past is a real person. I would say 95% of the people he encounters in the past. There are a couple of fictional characters that I put in the past. But, all of the Black senators that he works with two Black senators. Senator Hiram Rubble is the first Black senator, and Senator Blanche Bruce was the second. He works for both of them. He works for Congressman Robert Elliott, who I've grown so fond of these people that I feel like I have a personal relationship with. And so so Robert Elliott is just he was an incredible orator, just a brilliant mind. So I really try to make those historical figures come to life. In terms of the present people are all fictional. They're all fictional. The aunt that he's staying with at her home in Mississippi, Aunt Carol, I would say that she is kind of a blend of both of my grandmothers. Okay. And so, and my grandparents, so I'm from South Louisiana, I'm from Baton Rouge. And my dad's side is in the country. So my dad's side is from the country, and my mom's side is from the city. So she was from the city proper, Baton Rouge, and my dad's side was outside Baton Rouge. And, my dad grew up on a farm. His dad had, lots of land. So I would say Uncle Leroy, Aunt Carol's husband, was based a lot on that grandfather, my paternal grandfather, in terms of how his strength, how he approached the world, and how I would say, how he focused on doing what he needed to do to protect his family. Right. And if that's anything from farming his own food to protect his family to, whatever it was, providing and taking care of and safeguarding his family was his priority. And so, but my grandmother's, Aunt Carol is kind of a blend of them. So that's yeah, I enjoy all those characters. Then the other characters in the present, we've got the love interest on the farm next door,
Miss Jasmine.
Miss Jasmine. Yes, yes. And so, that's probably a blend somewhat of my sister and my cousin and just different people, that I love. And then Jasmine's father is a college professor at Alcorn State. And, that reminded me of one of my friend's fathers who was a college professor. He was probably the first Black college professor I ever met. And so I thought about him as I was writing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had some good reference points, at least if nothing else, but for the character of the person,
right.
Which is always good to draw from.
Exactly.
What was your favorite thing about writing Black Was the Ink?
Oh. One of my favorite things was being surprised. I would surprise myself as I was writing it because I would have a general idea of where I wanted the story to go, but I wouldn't know how it was going to get there. And it was almost like I would set my fingers on the keyboard and then the story would just kind of come out of me, but I didn't really know where it was coming from. And it's like when you're writing something and you laugh yourself or you cry yourself, it's like, where did that come from? I didn't even expect to go there, but it went there and it really fit and worked. And so I enjoyed that.
Okay, so that's like you had one idea in mind.
Yeah.
But as you begin to type, it would just flow in a whole different direction.
Yeah, it would be more like I had the end point in mind. Like I know I want Malcolm to end up here at this location because that's kind of the plot point of where I want the story to go. But how am I going to get him there? Who is he going to meet along the way? What's he going to say to these people? I wouldn't know that. And so it was the just kind of that creative process of building the story to take it in the direction that I wanted it to go.
I understand. So how did you manage your time? How did you manage your time between being a mom, work, and then to write? Because being an author is not an easy task.
Yeah.
And you alluded to you kind of started this in 2015. So how long did it take you to get to the end result?
Yeah. It took a lot of work. I don't even know if I could add up the amount of hours that I put into this. But what I'm big on is making lists, because I feel like if you try to tackle some big thing all at once, it's too intimidating. But if you can break it down into small parts and I can focus on that one small part at a time, then I feel like I'm accomplishing something and I can keep going. And so, first, when I first had the idea in the summer of 2015, my first thought was I need to research and I need to learn more about this period and the people in it and the places and all of that. And so I took about close to a year, maybe, somewhere around there, just researching and organizing my thoughts and making, lists of these are the different historical people and this is what they were like. And, these are the laws that were being passed and all of that. And so I spent about a year just kind of immersing myself in the world. And then I took another year to year and a half to write my first draft. And again, just tried to break it into really small bite-sized pieces, where maybe if I could just get through a page on a day, then I could pat myself on the back and say, okay, all right, you accomplished something. And so little by little. And then after that, it was a long period of editing as well. And I mean, probably spent more time in the editing process than I spent in the writing process.
In the writing process, yeah.
Yeah. But it was 2018, I submitted my manuscript to a contest that my publisher was having, that Lee and Low was having, and it was their New Voices Award. And I submitted it in August of 2018. And I got a phone call, I think, in about February of 2019. And so I had long put it out my mind, forgot that I had even submitted it, assumed I didn't win because it's been more than 6 months.
Hadn't heard anything.
I hadn't heard anything, and then got the phone call, and they said, and I got the second place award. So I got the honor award, and then they said that they loved the book so much and wanted to make me an offer to publish, and wanted to
Oh,
work
that's
with me.
awesome.
Yeah, so that's how that came about. And then that's pretty much when the editing process started, and it was just, working and tweaking, and yeah, so it's been quite a journey. I'm excited to be close to the finish line.
Exactly. So this is your first novel. So have you, besides any form of writing for work, had you done any other creative writing?
Not really. I mean, not in a long. When I was in
Not
high
since
school,
school.
right? Yeah, when I was in high school, I had my little poetry book,
Right.
where I was writing my poems and things. But no, I do a ton of writing as a lawyer. I do a ton of writing for work, and so that's kind of what gave me a little bit of the confidence that I could do this, because it's like, well, I write for other people all the time. Why can't I write for myself?
Write for myself. Exactly.
Why can't I write what I want to write, and explore what I want to explore? And so, yeah. So, but I've learned a ton, from this.
So what would you tell that young sister, young brother who wants to write, who writes poetry, who's creative writing? What would you tell them now about, to expound on being an author? Or write that first book.
What I would say, and this might be cheesy, but this is what I thought of recently, where I was just thinking about the intimidation factor. Is I was thinking, I can't write a book, and maybe I can't write a chapter, and I can't write a paragraph, and I can't write a sentence, but I can write a word. And if I can write a word, then I can write a sentence. If I can write a sentence, I can write a paragraph. If I can write a paragraph, I can write a chapter. If I can write a chapter, I can write a book. And so just break it down, and, take that no. Don't be the one to tell yourself no. If there's something that you want to say, that I'm going to say that, God put something unique inside of all of us. And I think it's our duty to share our gifts with the world. And so if you feel like you have something on your heart that you need to share, and you need to communicate, just start, just start writing it, and don't expect what you write the first time to be perfect. Just get it out there, and then you can work on it, and you can improve on it, and you can share it with people that you trust, like your parents or your friends or whoever. I can't even tell you the number of people that I've asked, will you read my draft? Will you read my book? Can you give me feedback? And I got so much wonderful feedback that I incorporated. And you can't be afraid of criticism, because you're going to get criticism, but criticism helps you grow, And so that's what I would say is don't be afraid to share your gifts.
That was not cheesy at all. That was actually very good. Don't ever put cheesy in front of that definition again. That was, because that's true. I mean, if I've attempted to write, do a little writing, and sometimes I've talked myself out of it.
Right.
But you're right. If I could think it, and I can put the word together one word at a time, put the sentence together, the thought.
Yep.
It will evolve. And
it will evolve.
I've started forcing myself, because there were some thoughts and things I would write about my mother and music. And so every day for the past week, I've been doing that. So about 15, 20 minutes, just writing.
Yeah.
And
it
started out as 4 pages.
Right.
I'm looking at it now, it's like, oh my God, it's 16 pages now.
Right. Like, just like that.
And actually, I found myself now, because I don't have the time to just type it out.
Right.
I will record it.
Diction. Yeah.
I will diction everything, what I'm thinking, and then I transcribe it.
And clean it up.
And then that was just from the transcription.
Yeah.
I started out with 10 pages, and then from there it's grown 6 more pages.
Yeah.
Because of my now typing and editing in.
And all you have to do is keep going.
Yeah.
You just keep going, and if you have to take a break, and then pick it back up. The other thing that was really helpful for me, and this comes from, I think, my lawyer background, is I really believe in outlining. Because, as I mentioned to you before, I would know where I wanted the story to go, but I wouldn't know how to get there. And it was because I really spent a lot of time thinking about the outline and
So that was my next question. That's a good point. Most authors do outline their book. So you actually outlined
Yeah,
kind of the overview of what
the
you wanted the book,
overview.
and then
Yeah.
broke it down
And then broke
per
it down.
chapter.
Exactly. And so I could give myself assignments because I had the outline, and I could say, all right, Michelle, today you're going to write half of chapter 3. That's all you got to do today is write half of chapter 3. And then you can go about your business, do what you want to do. But it was like, I could give myself a little piece, a little small assignment that I could handle. Because can't nobody just write a book? Like that's so hard. That's so mind boggling. But, you could, like you said, you've already written 16 pages. The hardest part is behind you because you've gotten started.
Yeah. Very true. The hardest part is to get out of your way.
Yeah.
Be it for writing, painting, photography, whatever that gift is,
Whatever
that you have.
Yeah.
The hardest part is getting
out
of
your
the
own
way. I don't have time. Okay.
Right.
Find a way. In every author I've talked to, they always say, well, I spend 15 minutes a day. I spend 30 minutes a day.
Yeah.
Or like you just said, I'm going to write a half a chapter today, or whatever that is. So half a chapter, you may be able to knock it out in 30 minutes or an hour.
Right.
Or hour and a half. But you already know how long that takes. So if I can get in, knock out this hour and a half, I'm good. I feel accomplished for the day.
Exactly. And the cell phone, I think, was also a godsend because of that little notes, the little notes. So it's like
the notes and the recorder.
Yes.
The recorder.
Yes.
I'm going to tell the world there is a transcription. There is an app that you can transcribe.
Okay.
It's about 90% accurate. It's called Otter.
Otter. Okay.
Otter.ai.
Okay.
And all you have to do is upload it. You take your audio, upload it. It takes probably 5 minutes for it to transcribe. And it's almost 90% accurate on your words.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when you get going and get flowing, pull out your transcribe, your notes, whatever it is. So wherever you are, you can get those pieces and then you cut and paste them in later and figure out how it fits into the broader story.
That's awesome. So what's the backstory of the title?
Okay.
How did you come up with the title?
Okay. So the backstory on the title. All right. So the original title of the book was actually Woke. So when I won the New Visions Award back in 2017, or I'm sorry, in 2019 was the year I won, the title that the manuscript had been submitted under was Woke. Because the story is about Malcolm's awakening, right? It's about how Malcolm changes and evolves because of his understanding of a past that he never even knew existed, and how that changed the way that he saw the present and the obstacles that were in front of him. And how that he felt empowered by that to be a change agent. So that was the original title. But that word is been used a lot in a lot of different connotations, and people have I feel like there's just been a lot around that word. And there's also another children's book by that title out now, which is an adorable, beautiful children's book. And so I wanted to think of a different title, and worked a lot with my editor. And we tossed around a lot of different names, and we wanted to try to capture the theme. And the reason Black Was the Ink spoke to us is for several reasons. One, the main character, Malcolm, is an artist, as you've seen. Okay. And so one of the ways that he processes what he's learning from these time travel trips to the past is he draws about it. That's the way he processes his present as well, but it's also how he processes what he's seeing. And he's using his ink, his ink pens, and making this incredible art. And then what Malcolm's really learning from when he's traveling to the past is how foundational Black people's experience has been to the fabric and the rights that make up everything that we think of when it comes to America. If you take, for instance, the fact that everyone who's born in America is automatically a citizen. That was not the case prior to the 14th Amendment. Okay, to the Constitution, which was passed during Reconstruction and which gave African Americans citizenship rights for the first time. And so it's like so many things that are, whatever you think America is, so much of it has been in response to and been led by Black people. And you know, with him going back to the Reconstruction era and really having the chance to work with these Black members of Congress as they were passing laws that were making real the promise of America. There's a lot that's said in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence that was not universally true as it applied to all people in this country. But really through the hard work and the labor and the persistence and commitment of Black Americans, you know, the abolitionists, you know, prior to slavery ending, the Reconstruction, people during Reconstruction, all the way through the Civil Rights Movement, all the way through today, I feel like Black people have constantly been trying to hold America's feet to the fire and make those promises real. And you know, those promises sometimes appear in laws, and laws are drafted with ink. And so it was kind of all those different layers of, you know, the ink of the laws, and as well as the drawings of our character, my main character, Malcolm.
I did, yes. That was one of Malcolm's gifts. And you also have, you know, various sketches throughout the book.
Yes.
Shout out to the illustrator.
Yes, shout out to the illustrator, Justin Johnson, who is a DC local person, fantastic artist, art instructor, and just an incredible artist. So he did the cover and he also did illustrations throughout the book. Really beautiful.
Great. He did a great job.
Thank you. Yes, he did. He did.
Now, I just heard you describe why Malcolm took he had a sketch pad out, but would you also say that was a form of way for him to process life or things that he was dealing with? Because a lot of times he would seem to take it out at a time when he was dealing with something or trying to process something.
Right. Yeah. You know, Malcolm, his experiences, I think, are fairly common experiences in a lot of ways for young Black youth today. You know, for one thing, you know, very tragically, he lost his father in a police shooting before he was born. So he didn't get to know his father. And it was a mistaken identity case. And so, you know, there's too many stories in the news about that today, you know. But his uncle was also incarcerated and got a disproportionate sentence, and was locked away for 20 years on a conspiracy marijuana charge. And so that's also something that, you know, I think a lot of people in the Black community are familiar with, a family member that they have not gotten to see for, you know, all this time. And as you mentioned at the beginning, Malcolm's whole trip to Mississippi came about because he was playing basketball with a friend when a shootout happened. And it was, you know, some gangsters shot up the basketball court. And so Malcolm had to, duck down and try to avoid those bullets. But then once the gangsters left, the cops showed up and they pulled a gun on him as well. And so it's that, you know, that the danger kind of coming from all directions in his existence. And so, so he has a lot, you know, that he has to process and work through, and art is definitely a way that he channels those feelings.
And I do like that, how there are a lot of takeaways I got from the book. That, of course, we talked about the history. There's Black history that people can draw from. There's also the empowerment of young people, because you show where Malcolm, you know, he stands up and he's empowered to do something for a cause. It shows also creativity, how to expound and, you know, use your inner strength to do something, be it in this case, being art. So all those things was that intentional? I keep going back to that word, because it almost seemed like each thing was intentionally placed in the book so that people could take something away. There is a nugget of some sort for every person who reads it to pull from the book.
Yeah, I would say it was intentional. And another part, I'm not sure if you've gotten to this part of the book, but another thing that was intentional is there's a white character, a young teenage white boy in the book. When Malcolm first encounters him, it's not a pleasant, a pleasant encounter. And there's also an opportunity for that white child to learn and grow and develop in the story based on what he learns about history. And so I wanted to write something where, no matter your station, your position, you could see yourself in this book and you could learn something from it.
Yeah, I truly, I definitely can see there were different elements so far that I can see myself in the book, be it now or as Malcolm's age.
Yeah. Yeah.
What surprised you most about writing this book?
You mean the process of?
No, just from what from writing it, or from what
Okay.
After writing the book, even with the characters, was there anything that surprised you that you just was not expecting to even, evolve or
I was really surprised at the number of historic parallels that I saw. So I'll just give you some examples of those. We all remember the birther movement, right? On President Obama saying, show me the birth certificate, long form, short form, remember all that, right? So my jaw dropped to the floor when I was, researching. And the first Black senator, who was also the first Black member of Congress, Hiram Revels, he was both the first Black member of Congress and the first Black senator. He almost did not get to join the Senate. And the arguments that the people were making was that he did not meet citizenship requirements. And I was like, what? Are you kidding? Like, what? He was born in the US, obviously, he'd been enslaved. But the argument that they were making is that because the 14th Amendment had only been passed a few years prior to when he was going into the Senate, the requirement to serve as a member of Senate was that you had to be a citizen for a certain number of years. And I don't know if it was set. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So they made it. So
it was an original birther.
He's an original birther, but because he wasn't a citizen since we passed this law long enough, and he's whatever age.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes. And it's like, remember, I'm writing this in 2015. I'm researching this in 2015. So not 2021, right? 2015, really at the height of all this. And yes, so it was just like.
That is a jaw dropper, but I'm laughing, but it's not a funny moment, but it is just, as a Black person, you find yourself laughing over stupidity, like, okay.
And so that was, a constant, there were so many things like that where I would research and it would have such a direct parallel to things that were happening, today. Another one was when I saw some of the descriptions of these rallies, that racists were having in their towns, and how they were, would have posters up that, had these distorted images of Black people, and, just all this really like vile imagery, and, saying terrible things, and then kind of like seeing some of the protests that were happening, in Washington, D.C. and all around the country, where I would see posters that right now, that would look the same. And it's like, I just read about that description. I was like, can't y'all just be more creative? Like you gotta recycle the same posters from the 1870s. Like let's evolve a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. So there was just a lot of those, like those things, where, similarly to Malcolm, where he was really kind of in a way living two different lives. He was living his present day, I'm here life. And then he would have these moments where he was just go back in the past. I felt that way as an author. I also felt like I kind of had my foot in two different worlds, because I was so immersed in that world, but then I was also seeing, this world, and could see how they blended. Right.
I can see that, because even as you stated, history has a bad habit of repeating itself, and you've read in depth a lot of what happened during this Reconstruction era. Here we are in 2020, between 2019 and 2021.
Right.
We've seen a lot.
Right. Right.
A bad history repeating itself again.
Right. And it's like, and I guess the question would be, how do we keep it from having the same outcome that it had the last time? Because we can't do that again.
We can't do it again. And I've told the things that we encountered through the last presidency that was in office, you have to realize it took what little we gained in 50 years was torn down in 4 years.
Right.
And it took us 50 years to get to what little bit of
right.
equalness and peace. But we start seeing that monster raise its head when President Obama was in office. And then when people start saying there's no racism, well, yeah, there is systematic racism.
Right.
But then you brought another person in when it came in, and he just opened Pandora's box.
Right.
And so everything that a person who talked behind closed doors with their friends and family
felt real
was
comfortable,
bold enough to now walk outside and say it to the world.
And it's dangerous.
And it's very dangerous because now, and I asked the same question that you asked. I said, well, it took us 50 years to get to 2008.
Right.
But then is it going to take us another 50 just to get back to what we were 50 years ago?
I know. And that's how that pendulum swung, you know, where they had this 10-year period where I think if you were sitting in their shoes, you really thought things were going to turn out differently. You were like, you know, we have representation now. We got voting rights. We're buying land. We're starting businesses. There was a hotel in Washington, D.C., across the street from the White House. It was one of the finest establishments in DC, owned by a Black man named James Wormley. And senators would stay there. You know, all types of dignitaries would stay there. This is in 1871. Who would believe that? You know?
Right.
Because that don't exist today.
It don't exist today. And we could talk of we could talk about the Tuskegee Airmen. Out of all the pilots that were flying in during World War II, and then you fast forward now, and I think that what's the general's name who's over security? The brother who's over Arthur over defense, and he's
the defense secretary you're talking about.
Yes, he said that since 68 to now, the military and leadership has only grown 2%. It has not grown in 2%. That's terrible. Yeah. And so you look at all the pilots that you had in World War II, and then we go back and look, how many pilots we should see numerous pilots flying commercial airplanes. Yeah. No different than Hidden Figures, and you see Karen, you know, Miss Johnson. And then how many blanks work for NASA now? Right. It's like we make all these giant leaps forward, and then in 2021, when we go back and look at history, we've taken almost the same amount of steps backwards. Right. Yeah. Or how has, you know, Black wealth changed? Yeah. This time period. We've lost, you know, so much wealth, you know, we can go on and on. Right. And I think that the book touches on a lot of these things. And I hope that the readers, especially our young people, because our young people are our future, that they will take and see the positive of the book and see how can I manifest this in myself and become a better me. Right. Yeah. You know? Right. Absolutely. And I do think that it's inspiring that that people were doing these amazing things so few years removed from slavery. And so it's like, if they could be doing all these things back then, under those conditions, what more can we be doing as well? You know, how do we break down those barriers and push? So rightly so. So what's next for author Michelle Cole? I'm looking forward to, you know, writing some more books. And I think all my books will continue to have a civil rights angle and historical fiction angle. That's what I'm really excited about. I think about, as I mentioned, I have four boys. So I approach this as, what do I need my kids to know? Understood. That makes sense. Sense. What did you major in undergrad? Econ and government. I went to the University of Virginia for undergrad, and was econ and government major. Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't major in history, because I see all this history
Yeah, I'm not sure if I took a history class. I audited, Julian Bond was a professor at UVA, and so he had a civil rights class, and so I audited his class because I couldn't, pass through without,
Right.
doing
You say
that.
at least saying I said it in I was in his
Yeah,
class.
I sat in Julian Bond's class. I could tell you that much. But yeah, so yeah.
Before we go, a few little fun facts. What favorite non-work hobby for Michelle?
Favorite non-work hobby. Um, let's see. I I love spending time with my family. It's not really a hobby, but at the ages that my kids are, they're so much fun. And when I'm not writing and working and wearing all these other hats that I
Yes.
have on, I like pouring my energy into them. And so spending time with them.
Cool. Now, how old are the boys?
The oldest is 8 and the youngest is 1.
Oh my gosh.
And so, another thing you asked me was,
How
where
did
did
you?
I find the time? Is that what
Yeah,
you're about to say?
I was getting ready to say it again. When did you
Where did you
find the
find
time?
the time? Part of when I would have the most time, ironically, was whenever I was on maternity leave. Like and I know people were like, how did you find the time in maternity leave? But that was the only time where it wasn't scheduled and I wasn't, working full time and everything else. And it was like, wow, I've got time for me, kind of, as long as I could keep this baby fed or napping, I can write. And
Right.
So I definitely used my maternity leave. And look, the government shut down at least a couple times since I've been working
That's
there.
true. We did have some shutdowns,
With some
long period of
shutdowns.
shutdown. This was pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID, and so I would definitely, take advantage of, if there was a shutdown or I'm on maternity leave. And since I had 4, and each time I took several months, and so I would just get to grinding. I'd start working my second job, which is being an author.
Right. Awesome. Favorite guilty pleasure?
Red wine.
Okay.
Is that a guilty pleasure?
Yeah, that could be a guilty pleasure, as long as we do
Okay.
it responsibly.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, not too guiltily, but maybe, I don't know.
Okay.
Is seafood? I mean, that's not that guilty, but maybe shellfish. Maybe shellfish is my weakness.
I was thank you. You from Louisiana. You from the South. I was thinking you're gonna tell me you like to do some cooking or.
Well, I don't call that a guilty pleasure. That would fall in the hobby camp.
That's the hobby camp.
Okay.
Yeah,
yeah. Not a guilty pleasure. The guilty pleasure would probably be all the sauce I put on what I cook.
Okay, what is your favorite dishes to cook? One of
them. Gumbo would probably be up there. Yeah,
so
and I still have to do that with my dad. So he's the head chef.
I'm
the sous chef. And so I'll get in there, with them.
So you make your own roux and you add what all you got crab meat in, you got
crab, shrimp. Sausage, shrimp, chicken, okra. I prefer okra.
Okra, yeah.
Gumbo. Yeah, that's my favorite. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I thank you very much for your time. We have been talking with debut author of a young adult book entitled Black Was the Ink, which is currently available as for pre-order at blackbookstore.com. And we appreciate you coming on. Continue being creative, continue writing, and we look forward for more great work from you. And we need to get you back on to for one of our book club series also, just to kind of, let's talk and get some young people on to just have a little conversation about the book once it's released.
Yeah, that would be great. Especially if they read it, I'd love to hear their reactions and answer any questions they may have. That would be wonderful.
Exactly. Well, thank you for joining us today with our author today, Michelle Cole, the debut author from her book, Black Was the Ink, which is currently available on blackbookstore.com.
Thank you.